friends, it's Gwen and I'm here to do my October wrap up today. I do have a couple of books that I did not finish and I am putting in the DNF pile and I am letting them go. And then I actually have quite a stack of books that I did read. Now I want to start this by saying I'm kind of proud of myself for this month because at the beginning of the month I was in a huge reading slump and then I would kind of get over it and then I'd kind of fall back into it, but I powered through and I just took time off to not read and I took my time with reading, and you would never know that I was in a slump with how much I actually read. I feel like the reason why I was feeling slumpy was because I was trying to push through books that I wasn't interested in. And I did pick a select group of books that I wanted to read for October that I thought that would be very interesting and very, fitting to the holiday and stuff like that. But once I released that and said, Gwen, you don't have to read for the season and you can just read whatever you want, I kind of had a better, reading month after that. There were a couple of books that had like boring parts and I was like, oh no, am I falling into my slump again? And I was a little worried about that, but overall, great reading month for me despite the reading slumps. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So I want to start with some books that I didn't finish. I already got rid of it, but I started with The Diviners. It is a huge chunky book. I wanted to get it out of the way first because it was so big and everybody's been raving about it. It's paranormal, set in the 1920s, and I was like, oh my gosh, perfect, because I just got finished watching The Great Gatsby, the movie, and I was like, yes, I'm in that kind of 1920s mood. But no, I really wasn't, and I didn't enjoy it at all. I got to page 60 and I DNF'd it. I already sent it off to a Twitter person for a books for trade. I have not received my book. She has received the book that I sent her, but I haven't sadly received the book that she was trading me, so that was kind of sad. So hopefully I'll get that soon though. So The Diviners, DNF. Then Walden. I picked up Walden for my TBR Jar challenge, which was to read a classic, and it is a classic that I have been wanting to get to for a very long time, about a year maybe a little bit more than that. My mother bought me this book at a store when I was visiting her one time. It was kind of like a used bookstore, but this is the bonded leather edition. Walden, I got to page 18 and I realized that I really do want to read that story because it was important to my grandmother, my mother, and I'm sure it's going to be to myself, but because of the writing style, I'm not really a super big classics reader. I wanted the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes to go along with it, so I am waiting to get that before I actually read Walden. So I still needed to pick up another classic, and I did do that, and I will get into that later on in this video. Other books that I DNF'd were one from my October pile, one that I recently hauled, Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. I DNF'd this. The first couple of pages were pretty good. There was like a couple of stories in here that were really creepy, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I love that this book glows and all of that, and I'm sure it's amazing, but it just started getting like really boring, and I wasn't even like 100 pages in, I don't think. And yeah, I was getting really bored, so I just figured, you know what, I'm just gonna put it down. And I mean, I have tons of books on my TBR shelf and I'm never gonna probably run out of books to read, so I'm probably just gonna go ahead and give this one up. I am doing this in the hashtag books for trade on Twitter. I'm never gonna finish The Shore by Sarah Taylor. I did read the first couple stories in this and I enjoyed them. They were all right, but this is a literary fiction novel and there are many stories that kind of tie in to make one bigger story, and I heard that Sarah Taylor is a great up-and-coming author and I had high hopes for it. But literary fiction, again, it's not really my thing, so yeah, I couldn't finish it, but I tried. So another hashtag books for trade. trying to read this. I actually got this from Blogging for Books, and I have been needing to review it since like a few months ago. But yeah, it's literary fiction, and I started reading it, and it was very reminiscent of Room by Emma Donoghue, just the writing style. It seems like a very interesting book. As far as like the story and stuff like that, but just the writing style, ugh, I just can't do it. And I thought like, oh, maybe it's just the first couple of pages. And there are pages that seem, you know, a little bit more normal writing style, but there are just too many parts in here that aren't, and I don't feel like pushing myself through another book like that. I am keeping this book though because I absolutely love the cover, and it's just a small little paperback, and this is like the picture that I took. It's like the header for my website. If you go to that, you'll see that. But I just think it's so striking and beautiful, and I just want to keep it because it's beautiful. So the first 4 books were DNFs. Not in that order, but yeah, I DNF'd a lot this month. But the first book that I actually read was the first book in the Maureen Kincaid series by Rachel Rawlings, and this is the Morrigna. And I read this book, and I do have a full written review of this on my website, and I will link that in the description box. But yeah, this had a lot of witches and vampires and demons and things like that. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It did have the creepy vibes, and but basically Maureen is on this task force because she can see the past through people's fingerprints, and this guy ends up giving her this book, and she sees something that's about to happen. So now she's off to save the world. She starts working with these witches and vampires and things like that, and so it was pretty good overall. It wasn't perfect by any means. It had its good points and it had its bad points. You could read my full thoughts on my review. Mid-October, and I was like, I need something easy to read. So I picked up the first volume in the Edward Scissorhands graphic novel trade, and oh my gosh, you guys, I tried to do a review of this, but it ended up being just like this fangirl episode. So if you want to see that, I will have it linked on the screen, but I did do a full written review of this on my website, which I will link in the description box. I also picked up Saga Volume 5, amazing, the art, everything, story. Some people were saying this wasn't as good as the other trades, but I really liked this one because it had been like 8 months since I read any of the other issues, and this kind of was like a great review. There were more characters added, the characters were more developed, there were unexpected deaths, there was hardly any nudity, and yeah, it was great. I loved it. I do have a full written review of this, and I will be linking that in the description down below as well. I wanted to pick up another Halloweenish read, so I finally picked up Half Bad by Sally Green. I know this book is like sold, but I've had it on my TBR shelf for quite a while, and I was hearing mixed reviews about it. People were either loving it or hating it, and I really loved this one. I loved the characters, I loved the world, I loved the magic system. I wish that the magic would have been more prevalent in the beginning of the story instead of just like the last quarter of the book, but it is the first in a trilogy, and I'm really excited to hopefully soon purchase and read the next book in the series, which is Half Wild. Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it was really good. Again, I do have a full written review of this, and I will link it in the description box below. The first chapter that I got at the Baltimore Book Festival, it's an excerpt from the Before, book 1 of a highly anticipated The Contamination trilogy, and this is written by Matthew William Jones, and it was just the first chapter, like a little sampler, and it was pretty cute. It was kind of funny though, because like when I was reading it, I had like a narrator in my head that was like one of those guys that have that really gravelly voice, like Hallmark Channel, and it just felt like a narration. But then it got into the story, and I was like, okay, you know, I can see that. I really want to see what chapter 2 is like. But yeah, I definitely had that narration in my head, so it may not be for everyone, and of course, you know, this isn't a finished copy or anything, so things could change, but it just seemed like it had that little hallmarky bit, narration bit in the beginning, and then it was about an alien that came down, and then the government, you know, was after the alien, and then they killed his parents, and now he's like trying to get revenge and all of that. So it was pretty interesting, but the thing that stuck out in my head was the narrating voice in my head for this book. So after that, I knew I needed to get on my classics because the month was just flying by. I had to do this classics thing. I was struggling to find a classic on my shelf, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use the Overdrive app, so that's what I did. I read 1984 by George Orwell, and it was very interesting. From the very beginning, I was intrigued. He was building the world. He was talking about the male protagonist and how he fit into this world. And it was a lot of, you know, governmental, you know, underlying things. And I was pretty okay with it. But I really wasn't invested into the story until someone that he worked with, the female that he worked with, Julia, slipped him a note. And once she slipped him a note and he read that note, from there, I was totally invested in the story. I really was enjoying it. I loved those bits. There was Mr. Charrington, I forget his name, but he had like a shop, and I really loved his shop, how that was all explained. And then he had an apartment above the shop, which was explained. And it was really kind of like a big brother is watching you type thing. And so everything that characters did in this, like, everybody knows. There was like hate weeks, and I don't know, I'm not really describing it well at all. I got through 81% of this book. I was so freaking proud of myself, you guys. I couldn't believe I got through 81%, but I was really struggling to pick up anything else until I was finished with this because I was really trying to finish it. But I got through 81%. So freaking happy. But then I kind of cheated and I read the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes. I think it was the Spark Notes for the remaining 6 chapters. And I'm glad that I didn't push myself through it because I think I would have just been disappointed. I didn't rate this book because obviously I didn't really read it all. But for the parts that I read, I probably would have just given it like maybe a 3 stars, maybe a 4 stars. But I'm not a classics reader, so that's why I didn't really want to judge it because I really don't have anything to like compare it to. So I kind of, you know, but I consider that completing my classics challenge because I did read 81%. I did read the Cliff Notes for the, I think it was the Spark Notes. I keep saying Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, same thing. I read that for the remaining 6 chapters, and yeah, I do have a full written review on my blog, and I will link that down below as well. The author Stephen J. Carroll was kind enough to send me 2 copies of his book, one for me to review and one for one of you. I do have a giveaway going on right now. It ends on November 7th, so please make sure to enter that giveaway before that time. This book kind of was reminiscent of 1984, as in the government kind of has control over its people. In this book, they have sensors implanted into themselves. They have like 3 different sensors, one in their eyes, one in their ears, and a locator sensor. So they can see everything that the person's seeing, they can hear everything that they're hearing. And because of that reason, the characters have developed a series of codes that they use to communicate things that they don't want the common to hear them doing, seeing, things like that. Alpha is our main character, and Theta is one of the female characters in the common, and they're like friends, and they're ones that have like the codes, and I don't know, it's very interesting. It was more readable for me than 1984. Alpha ends up escaping from the common, and when he gets into the outside world, he's totally shocked by everything else that's like going on. The problems that I had with this book were that some of the major details of the story weren't adding up, and I was still like, at the beginning, I was taking them for what they were. I was trusting in the author, trusting in the process, and just going along with it. But then as it started progressing, there were just more and more times where it was like, this is not making any sense. Like, if this happened, then how is that happening? So, I mean, I really enjoyed the book. I liked the story, but you have to overlook a lot. Now, this is an art copy, so maybe some of those things were changed. Highly doubtful because there are pretty big parts, but I am interested in the second book to see what happens, so I will be following along in this series. So I picked up First and Then by Emma Mills, and this was sent to me by Uppercase subscription box, but I pay for it myself. I'm not sent this for a review. So I got this in my Uppercase subscription box, and I really liked it. It was really cute. It was typical high school, you know, romances and friendships. I do have a full review of this on my blog as well. I've been very busy writing reviews. But yeah, it's not perfect by any means. I ended up rating this 3 stars because I just thought it was pretty average, but if you're just looking for a quick, nice, fun read, I would recommend it. The last book that I read this month was Rebel Mechanic, All is Fair in Love and Revolution by Shanna Swinson, and I also got this as part of one of my Uppercase subscription boxes, and it was kind of like, I mean, with the little cog here and the cog on the front, you're thinking steampunk, and it did have a lot of steampunk elements. This bookmark is life, okay, you guys? It actually has something to do with what's in the story, and I had no idea that it would. Love it. I need more. So I'm probably going to get some red ribbons and some cogs and be tying these to my jackets and just have them there, because if you read the story, you'll know why. I just thought it was such a cool element that you really don't know, like, if this has to do with anything, and then when you read it in the story, you're like, oh my god, it makes sense. So this story is set in 1988, and there is a magic element to this. So there are some technologies that are in this world in 1988 that weren't in our world in 1988, and then of course, you know, there's the opposite too. Some things that we had then they don't have, and some things that, you know, we have now they have. Like, it's hard to explain, but the story starts off with Verity. She is on a train ride to New York. She's going off to interview for a couple of governess jobs, and on that train ride, there are bandits that are like stealing this case, and they're escaping. So there's these masked bandits, and she like hits one of them over the head. It's so hilarious. But they end up escaping and all that. So then she gets to New York, she disembarks, and she meets these people who end up getting her to one of her interviews. She gets hired by one of the families, and the family that she works for is like so freaking awesome. They're like one of the wealthy Magister families, which are the people that have magic. So there's the people that have magic, and they're kind of like the ruling class, the wealthier people, and then there are the rebels. And the rebels are the mechanics. They are, you know, kind of like the underground society fighting against the British rule to gain their freedom. And the magisters are the people that have magic, so they're in power. And of course, they're just going along with the British rule. And so Verity kind of gets mixed up in this world of working for this family, but also trying to help the rebels. And there is a little bit of romance, but there's a lot of action too. And I just thought it was really fun. There's magical elements thrown in, and I really enjoyed this. I do have a review on my website, so if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out. I have lots of reviews in the description box for you guys. So those are the books that I read in October. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Let me know if you have any good spooky books that you read this month. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!